Three. Oops. And all righty. Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Karen with AgHires. Thank you for joining us today. Before we dive in, I do have a few housekeeping items. First, we are recording today's session, and you will get that replay tomorrow. Second, feel free to drop your questions in that Q&A box in the bottom, and we will answer as many as we can at the end. I'm excited to introduce today's speakers, Lori Kohler, founder and owner of AgHires, and Lila Hilster, our recruiting content lead. Lila started here at AgHires as a recruiter, and with her background in agribusiness communication, she moved into the marketing department, where she focuses on creating strategic content that supports hiring across the agriculture industry. Lori grew up in agriculture on a potato and grain farm, and she began her career in HR. She founded AgHires in 2014 with the goal of helping ag employers like you find and hire top talent. And with that, I will hand it over to Lori and Lila.
Welcome, everybody.
Welcome.
We're going to talk today, give you a little background on AgHires. We've been here for 12 years, and we've got a lot of content for today. We have seen many offers done with our employers over the years across all of our team members. We have a lot to share. We recruit across the entire U.S. in all segments and sectors of agriculture for professional up to C-suite roles. And we also have a sourcing service for our clients as well as a job board just for agriculture. So you wouldn't think that this is a complicated topic. Lila, I'm going to need you to click. Okay, it's not working on my end. You wouldn't think this is a complicated topic of an offer. It's a simple thing to offer a candidate a job, but it's actually pretty complicated, and we see employers unfortunately get it wrong during this offer time. So we're going to talk about today, how do you confidently talk about compensation with candidates and job seekers, and then understand why are some declining offers and see if we can't avoid some of those declines from happening in the first place. And then also we're going to talk about what it would take to create and define a competitive offer, and then how would you actually deliver that offer in a way that gets more acceptance. It's already a very tight job market. What we don't want to do is find out all-star and then realize, oops, we didn't get the offer stage right. So I always start these kind of webinars a little bit on what's going on in the market. I am a market person. I kind of want to know what's going on in the labor market. If you look at your compensation increases the last couple of years, it usually follows the cost of living increases. So for 2026, you're looking at about 2.8% in terms of cost of living increase. A lot of pay increases are around there or slightly follow there. It's a little up from last year, which was 2.5, but we definitely have settled into that kind of 2.5% rate the last couple of years here. And it looks like that'll probably continue unless something rocks the market too much. Unemployment's been relatively low, or about 4%. We've been about 4% the last couple of years. It's just been kind of steady, which means the labor market is still tight for our employers. The one thing to note is I would call it a pendulum swing or a shift in the market. As employers, we have been short on talent, and for a while, for a couple years, we were throwing everything in the book, lots of money to try to attract candidates. And employers were kind of, it was a candidate market, still is, but a severe candidate market where employers were kind of doing whatever it took to get the hire. Now I'm seeing employers take a little step back and say, okay, what's the ROI on this person? What is too much for that role for what it can bring to the company, and what are some aspects of this role that could be trained that maybe I could get someone else at a compensation level that fits. We've also seen more rescinded offers with some kind of odd candidate behavior. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, more so than the prior couple years since then. So I feel like the pendulum swing a little bit on how employers react to the shortage and what they are or aren't willing to do in terms of comp and offers. So I'd say get comfortable with the talk. And when we talk about the talk, we mean the compensation talk. It is uncomfortable if you talk to most of our employers. They don't like asking it. They really don't like talking about it. But somehow, if we're hiring, we've got to get to what is the compensation on the table for both sides. It will always be a little muddy. I can't say you're going to leave here and have a cookie cutter exact way of how to handle every single role. It's will never be that clear, but we can definitely give you tips and scenarios of how to navigate some of these discussions. One of the ways to get comfortable is to get more confident in talking about the subject. We've all been told not to talk about pay, and yet when we're employers, we do need to talk about pay. I think for some of us, we have to get comfortable with how we're going to ask the question about pay. And that comes down to just getting your language right. Usually I'll do something where towards the end of the interview, I'm just going to say, "Hey, pivoting over to compensation, now that you know more about the role, what would you be looking for in terms of pay for your next transition or job transition?" It could be said probably 1,000 different ways, but at the end of the day, I'm hinting that I'm going to pivot over to pay now. We're going to talk about that next. And what are you looking for? And we do avoid asking where they're currently at, but more of what are they looking for in the role that you're hiring about. We get the question a lot about when to talk about pay. So when should it come up? I've had several people online or recruiters say you should ask about pay immediately, right in the beginning. Let's not waste each other's time and just get right to it. I don't agree with that method, just saying it, because how do you know what your number is going to be? You don't know anything about this person. You're not sure what their capabilities are. You're not sure if you even like them. You're not sure what their ROI is to the company, and then they don't know anything about you. They don't know your hours. They don't know your travel. They don't know your culture. They don't know the expectations for the role. How could they give you a number? So I don't like that method. You do see it out there, kind of talked about in the internet. I would highly recommend you talk about it in the first interview. I don't want you to wait to interview two or three and find out we're way off in terms of alignment. But I would like to see it towards the end of the first interview where you had enough to learn a little bit about their background. They've learned a little about you, and let's talk about it. The pro tip I have for you is to not just talk about it one time. We always tell our candidates, we're going to talk about it. It's a little early to talk about comp right now, but we do want to talk about it. And then we're going to revisit a few times throughout the process. As you learn more about the candidate, your numbers might change. As they learn more about you, their number might change. And so you want to keep that dialogue open for some discussion further in the process. In terms of the approach, so this is the big question. Who goes first? Do I ask them where they're at? Do I go ahead and throw my number out? How does this work? It's kind of an awkward dance I see employers and candidates do together. Here it goes again. It's not a cookie cutter approach. So part one is, are you going to list pay on the job posting itself? If you're going to advertise for the role on a job board such as AgHires, do you want to list a pay range? Now, there are states, and we do have information on our aghires.com website that will show you, but there are some states that require you to list a pay range on the job posting. So sometimes you're going to be legally required to put a range on there. If you're not legally required, there are some pros and cons to putting it on the job posting. We did a survey of 700 people answered this through a job seeker survey. 700 people responded. They're 70% more likely to apply for a job that has pay listed. In this transparent market, people want to know everything early. I think because of video and internet and social media, they want all the details ahead of time. So you will get a higher candidate pool if you put a posting. What's great if you put the pay on the posting is if you've got a range, you've got a set range, you're comfortable with sharing that range. You might not be comfortable sharing that range. Maybe you're working on slowly moving up your pay ranges and other people in your organization may not have the same compensation. You're trying to adjust that. Or you just don't know. It's a new role for you. You're not sure what you want to pay. Or you've been hired for it in 20 years because someone's retiring and you're not sure what the going rate is. And you don't want to put out a range that isn't, kind of acceptable or kind of a market range. And then you're going to have all these missed good candidates because your range is too low. So there are reasons why you wouldn't want to put it on. But if you are competitive with your pay range, you're comfortable sharing, you should share it because you get extra applicants. Now, who again goes first when you're talking? So that has to do with job postings. But let's talk about when you're together in an interview. Who goes first on asking? I would suggest you ask first in terms of where they're at. If you're comfortable, you have a set budget, you know exactly what that pay range is for all your employees that have the same role. If you have a set range, I'd go ahead and share your set range first. If you don't have a set range or you don't have a set budget, you're kind of that, again, you're not sure where to pay. You're open on backgrounds, maybe an entry level to a senior person, that person, each of those are worth something different to the company. If you're not sure where you want them to be, then I would go ahead and ask the candidate first. Likely though, I would say, I don't know if I had to put a number to it, maybe like 1 in 3, about a third of the time, typically, if I'm asking someone for their compensation, a job seeker, they will flip that script back to me and say, well, what are you looking to pay for this person? So I would say be ready with your answer if they flip the script. Now you might say, well, I still don't know my range. You can still, at the end of the day, say, I'm really not sure on our range. You can say, I'm really open, depending if someone's a couple years post college or someone's bringing us 20 years of experience. And both of those would really be different ranges for us. And we're just looking for the best candidate. So sometimes if you don't have one, it's okay if they flip the script and you still don't have a range. Or if they flip the script and you want to go ahead and give your range, you could say something like, well, we were kind of budgeting around, give or take, 70 to 80,000. But it will really just depend on the candidate in front of us. So there's many ways to approach it. I would say the biggest takeaway here is don't treat it like poker. You don't need to hold your cards super close, super tight, and be mega strategy. The best way to get to this kind of compensation alignment and agreement is a very open dialogue and just kind of showing your cards, showing where you're at, showing how you're coming up with this. And they will respond. Actually, the more poker you play, the harder they play on their end, the more they're going to respond with openness to you since you've been so transparent throughout the process. Again, not cookie cutter, but those are a couple of tips on what to expect when you do ask about compensation. When you think about when candidates are over budget, this does come up. You have found your all-star. Actually, this comes up a lot, that the all-star you want is, guess what, over your original range that you had budgeted. Here's where we're just going to talk it out. Here's where you have a couple decisions to make. If you feel like your budget could be stretched based off the candidate, then you've got to decide, well, is this candidate worth it? Let's say you budgeted 100 and they want 120,000. And you think, well, maybe I have wiggle room. Then you have to decide, is the candidate bringing the extra ROI? Are they just asking for more and they don't have the ROI, or you actually believe they have the ROI? And what I mean by that, do you believe they're going to do something to bring in additional revenue to the company or save money to the company or add value to the company that would make sense and kind of justify the extra spend? Or do you feel that you can get another candidate at the same pay and not have to spend that? So one is, do you have the budget? Step two is, do you think they're worth the extra stretch? A lot of times, I will have to tell you, the all-star is worth the stretch if you can stretch it. But just know when you're trying to chase something that's not worth the stretch in terms of their background. If you can't go over budget, let's say it's a tight market right now in agriculture. We're going to be up to some really low commodity prices here this year, and it's going to be tight. So if you're saying I have a set budget and that candidate is over budget, I would suggest you just really, again, being transparent and kind of showing your cards and saying, we really have a budget of X. Let's say it's 80,000 and they want 95. We really had a kind of a firm budget on 80,000. it does require, I'm just making this up, less travel or blah, blah, blah for you. Uh, is there some wiggle room on your end? There's no harm in asking the candidates potentially. And they might say, no, I'm at a firm 95. Okay, it just doesn't sound like a fit. Or they might say, do you think I could get there within a year or two if I can kind of do this or this for the company or prove something? And okay, now we've got open discussions where we might be able to get there in terms of compensation. The third option, I'll just throw that out there, is you just don't know if you can go over budget or not. There's nothing wrong with saying, gosh, I'll be honest, we budgeted 80, you're at 95, you're bringing in more than we had imagined, so we're excited about that. I just don't know if we can go over budget, so let us run some numbers, let us do some thinking. If you don't mind, could you also think on your end with, is your 95 firm or is there some wiggle room on your end as well? We'd really like to kind of move forward on kind of exploring this option with you. So there's nothing wrong with option door number three, which is I'm not sure, but give me some time and let's figure this out together. It will also give the candidate a little bit more time to think about how they want to respond and if they are really interested in your opportunity that they might have some wiggle room as well.
Okay, we have a poll for you guys that should be popping up on your screen. If you had a candidate decline an offer over the last few years, from what you can remember, what reason did they provide? Give everyone a few moments to get that answered.
And we put there could be an other, but we put our top ones that are most typical reasons for a declined offer. Curious if we can get kind of some answers from you guys on what has been going on in your market.
Okay, looks like accepted another offer was almost half.
Mm-hmm.
Compensation, 23%. Okay. Very interesting. We'll share a little bit about kind of what we're seeing on our end with our clients as well. But as Lori mentioned, next. There we go. These are kind of our top reasons we are seeing with our own clients. And we actually pulled some data from our last 30 declined offers with our own clients, and nearly half of them decided to just stay with their current employer. And the other half was pretty much split between the pay and benefits not aligning and then the candidate accepting a better offer. So we've really been seeing this trend of candidates probably the last year or so just doing this shopping and kind of comparing more so, seeing what they can get and going through that full, interview process, 3, 4 interviews just to get an offer and then say, I'm just going to stay with my current employer. And we're seeing this across all ages, all levels of professionals. So it's kind of the new culture now. It's been interesting. So if you're seeing that, you're not alone. And if you're seeing more declined offers in general, you're not alone. We are seeing it more and more over the last year, I'd say. But we kind of have to get used to this new norm and do more work on our end to ask more questions, communicate more near the end to kind of gauge, are they really serious about this offer or are they just kind of exploring and shopping? I also want to hit on, the importance of the candidate experience when it comes to if a candidate is going to accept or decline in the end. Remember that not only are you interviewing them, but they are interviewing you as well. And a job transition is a big choice, a big move, big decision for people. And sometimes we as employers forget that that's a big decision for them to make as well. So take that into consideration when you're communicating with candidates, the timeline of your hiring process. One of our recent clients had a great candidate in the final stages, but the client was just kind of starting to drag their feet, wasn't really communicating up after those last few interviews. And the candidate decided, hey, I don't really, I think this is a red flag. I don't really want to even consider an offer from this company because that communication at the end and just kind of the dragging the feet. So just remember that candidates really do take that into consideration as well and want to feel just as prioritized when it comes to you having them join their team. So what makes a competitive offer? What does that really mean? Obviously, salary is a big one for candidates, and that salary has to be not only competitive in the industry, but also locally. And we'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide on how to determine what is competitive locally to you, how you can figure that out. And then your perks. Outside of your typical retirement, PTO, insurance, we see so many farms and small businesses offering, housing, a vehicle, produce, or meat, and not really talking about these perks. And these are really big perks that candidates, I mean, they have a lot of value behind them that sometimes the employer doesn't really think about. So you want to make sure you are showcasing those in your job postings, in your interviews, really talking about what all you offer, not only the perks and benefits, but talk about your culture. What makes you unique? What makes you better than the farm, a mile down the road? So really make sure you are articulating that in your interviews, talking about your perks and what sets you apart. Here you can just see a couple benefits of what small businesses are offering. Only about a little over half offer health insurance. And this is such a big one. If you can offer health insurance, even if it's a 50-50 split premium where you pay half and the employee pays half, that's a huge, huge perk to candidates. And having to sign up for their own health insurance is a huge hassle, huge process. They have to reapply every year. So if you can save them from that headache, you already have a major, piece of a competitive offer. Retirement benefits, whether that's a simple IRA, a 401k, about 37% offering that with a 4.2% average match. So another great thing you can add to your offers to make them competitive. And then PTO, this is kind of a hot topic right now. We recommend 10 days minimum PTO for new hires. And really that, if you're not at that 10 days already for your new hires, we suggest working up to that best you can, because the 15 days is becoming a little bit more competitive, a little bit more standard, especially after a few years of that employee being there. You want to be able to offer that 3 weeks or 15 days. So definitely work towards that 10 days of PTO if you're not already there. And that is accruing at day one. Okay, how do we know our pay is competitive? So of course you can talk to others in the industry, whoever's willing to share. Not everybody might be willing to share, but I think the ag industry is pretty tight knit and humble and are willing to, be upfront. Researching other job postings and listings. As Lori mentioned, so many states now require you to share pay in your postings. So it's out there, it's available, and you can find similar jobs in your area. That's a really good way to kind of gather some more data on a range. Salary surveys, those are out there, of course. I would say probably take those more with a grain of salt because they're not, local to you, and they're a little bit harder to gauge. Listen to what candidates are saying as you're having those discussions with all those tips Lori mentioned. Just really listen to where they're at, what they're looking for. And after, 4 or 5 interviews, you should have a pretty good idea what that role, what's the going rate, what are candidates expecting. So that's probably the best way to do it, hearing from the candidates themselves. And of course, you can connect with experts. Here at AgHires, we consult on compensation. We analyze comp for roles constantly, and we'll make sure and advise on that as well. Make sure you come with a competitive offer in terms of pay. A good baseline, if you know the candidate's current salary, but maybe they didn't share what they're looking for. Sometimes candidates will just openly come out and say, and throw you off from the plan that Lori suggested. They might say, well, I'm currently at this. I don't really know what I'm looking for next. And that might be even more so a younger candidate early in their career. But we really recommend a 10 to 15% increase is a competitive move for a candidate from where they're currently at to consider a new role. So just to help you on that in case you don't know what they're looking for. Okay, we have another poll for you about offers. Do you extend a verbal offer, so that could be in person or over the phone, before sending a written offer letter?
I'm very curious on where this lands
So
for the audience. I know our clients sometimes are split.
give everyone a few more moments here. Okay. Wow. That's good. I'd say almost 80% does extend a verbal offer before sending a written one. That's good. That's very
Mhm.
good. Right. We'll hand it over to Lori to walk through kind of that offer extension process and kind of what we recommend and what works
Mhm.
really well for our clients.
I would say this is where we see the fumble of the ball happen most of the time. You are right at the end zone. You know you want this candidate, and we see this kind of not this process not being followed, and things kind of go south pretty fast. And it's really hard to gain that momentum back, and you usually you'll lose the candidate altogether. I do attribute this. I'm going to scroll for a second because I do love cooking from scratch and all the things, but I can't help it. I'm an entrepreneur and I don't always follow the recipe and I mess with it a little bit. I would say this recipe right here for offers, I do not want you to mess with. There is I would say a set four-stage formula to really get the offer right. And again, not like cooking, I don't want you to mess with it too much. A pre-offer or a soft offer, as we talk about it, a verbal offer, which it looked like a majority of you are doing, a written offer, and then the background checks and the reference checks. There's not a step in here I would want you to skip to get the offer right. Okay, the pre-offer offer, we often call it here internally a pre-offer or a soft offer. So what is that exactly? That is where you're not actually offering them the job, but you are trying to gain alignment with where we think we're going to fall on both sides for compensation, maybe bonus and commission, expectations for travel or work days and benefits and all the sorts. You think you've been kind of talking about pay so far. We've been at a high level. If you're doing it right, you would have talked about some of this. But a soft offer, you might say something like, well, I had a kind of official offer that this is an official offer, but just want to make sure we're in full alignment with this role and the expectations and where we'd be at in terms of pay and just kind of get your feedback. What this allows for is a little bit more pre kind of negotiation, any elephants in the room that need to be addressed or any elephants we didn't even know were in the room that should be addressed that kind of come out with this. You would do a pre-offer or soft offer in two scenarios, one after your final interview before a formal offer, or sometimes it actually happens before your final on-site. Let's say someone's going to be having to move their entire family for this role and they're going to travel to come on site to visit you and there's going to be an expense to you, there's going to be a chunk of time for the candidate, and this is a good opportunity to make sure, let's make sure we're all on the same page with where we would be at. If you're going to come for an on-site, you would have already talked to them one or two times. It's probably time to start talking a little bit further about this kind of soft offer to make sure we're in alignment. And sometimes from there we realize, oops, we're not in alignment. Let's not do the on-site. And so it just saved again timing and costs with that. And I've also seen where we actually just had a soft offer where expectation of hours were talked about ahead of time and negotiated, or you find they just changed their number that they originally gave you pretty significantly, or you're up against another offer that you weren't up against when you first started talking. There's a lot of what ifs that could happen that come from the pre-offer, and then it just helps smooth out offer time where you're not putting together a full offer letter just to find out you guys are way off in PTO or commissions or what have you. And this is the opportunity for the candidate to ask more questions. Let's say you have a commission structure. I was going to ask you that, like when is commission paid out? Or how does that work? Again, it's a little ahead of time, so you don't have to have any hiccups later when you're actually doing the full offer. And then the offer letter itself, I am going to suggest you consult a lawyer. We were going to give you a sample, but every state is slightly different. And since we recruit across the entire US and Canada, I don't have every single state memorized with all the intricacies that would be in an offer letter. So if you haven't had a lawyer look at one, I would. And if you don't have a template, I would definitely get one for you to use kind of going forward. But a couple essential details you want in there, of course, is job title, expected start date. In terms of their pay, you would want to list that in terms of biweekly or weekly, however your payroll is. So you wouldn't want to say, you would be making 80,000. You would want to say 80,000, let's say divide by 26, whatever that comes out to for their biweekly. You could put in parentheses that it is 80,000, but what you don't want to do is have an offer that says you're going to get 80,000 without the biweekly or weekly listed because it looks like you owe them 80,000 with no time expectations. So I would be careful of that. In terms of benefits, you don't want your whole benefits package. You could have it as an addendum or shared, but they're co-premiums that might change on a yearly basis or their coverage that might change on a yearly basis. You wouldn't want that on the offer letter. You would want to say you're eligible for benefits starting the first day of the next month following your employment or whatever the case may be, or starting in 90 days, you'd be eligible for our benefits. And then you would just attach addendums on what the current benefits package is, knowing that's going to change. Same thing with commission structure. You're eligible for our commission program and then attach an addendum of what your current commission program is because your current commission might change. You don't want the candidate to come back 2 years from now and say, well, my offer letter said I was going to get this and you just changed it on me. So just be careful with how you structure what those addendums are. The biggest pro tip we can leave you, I will, if I had a highlighter and make it bright red, I probably would have, but include a deadline on your offer letters. When you give an offer letter, it is not an open-ended invitation for whenever you want to accept. I don't really want them to compare it to 1,000 other offers. Either 1 4 calendar days. Sometimes if it's over the weekend, they have time to think about it. If you've already been interviewing several times and you've done your pre-offer or soft offer, they shouldn't need that much time to accept or not accept. If you give them a week or 2 weeks, it's too long. I think they could just be kind of using it to compare to other offers. If you say you need to accept by tomorrow, I think that's slightly rude. So I think that 4 day mark is my favorite, but regardless, put a deadline on it, and if not, the offer will be rescinded if they don't respond by that deadline.
All right, our last poll here. We are asking about background checks. Do you include them as part of your hiring process? Give you a couple more moments. Okay, 77% do run background checks.
That's
Okay.
surprised. I thought it was gonna be more about 50-50, so that's interesting.
Mhm. Well, we are going to circle back to background checks in a moment. First, we're going to go back to more on the offer letter, kind of some legal do's and don'ts to make sure, you're not burning yourself on what you include in that offer. Lori kind of talked a little bit about those addendums and things. First of all, in our offer letter, we want to make sure we state that the offer is conditional. So that means until the background check comes back, drug screening, reference checks are completed, that offer is not truly official. So it is dependent on those elements. So you definitely want to include that in your offer. And you also want to include an at-will statement. Now, every state in the US, besides Montana, is an at-will employment state. So you want to include an at-will statement in your letter. This just prevents it from being, interpreted as like a legal contract of employment. And basically the employee or you could walk away at any time for any reason. And that just kind of protects you there. And then any other, terms you need to include that they'll have to complete any specific training, certifications, they have to sign an NDA, things like that you want to outline upfront as well. And then on the don'ts, we definitely want to avoid legal sounding terms, contract agreement, all of that. And you don't want to promise any future compensation raises, bonuses. You can say you may be eligible to receive and give them a little bit of detail there, but that doesn't tie you to it in case something changes. And you also don't want to overpromise job security, overtime, things that aren't always in your control. Okay, back to the background checks here. When is the right time to run a background check? So you don't really want to run a background check right after the first interview. You're going to be, wasting a lot of money and time conducting those. We really suggest waiting until you have your candidate, your all-star that you're ready to make an offer to. So once you extend that conditional job offer, that's when you would at the same time run that background check, and it really only takes a couple days to come back. Sometimes 1 or 2 days, can be a little longer depending on the case. But you really want to save it for those final candidates in those final stages. And included with that, you get their criminal history, their past jobs, their education, and then you usually have options to add on, their driving record or credit check if it's applicable to that role. I believe you can't run a credit check unless it's a financial role where they'll be handling finances. So you can add on additionals like that. And of course, you always want to get written consent before you run a background check. Usually the candidate has to fill out, you email them a form they have to fill out to get it started. But we are all about the background checks, highly recommend, really happy to see a lot of you, conducting those in your process. We've seen several clients get, kind of heartbroken when they find out some not so great things after running a background check. One of our recent clients was ready to hire this fantastic agronomy sales, individual, was just what we consider a dreamy candidate. Had the whole package, nice guy, checked all the boxes. Client ran the background check, came back with a ton of fraud, jail time, all these things, and the candidate completely denied it, even though after cross-referencing, it was in fact true. But you don't want to be blinded by how much you love that candidate, how great they are, because you really need to run that background check before and know what you're getting into, know that candidate before you hire them. So, and if you don't have a background check process in place, AgHires, we do offer them as just a service on its own, so you can just run them one time with us if you need some help with that.
So rescinding the offer, this does happen more, and actually, I personally have encouraged some of our employers to rescind an offer if I think something's going, awry during the process. Rescinding the offer is actually where you've given them an offer, and you are basically rescinding. You're going to take that offer away and take it off the table. Why would you do that when you went to the trouble of offering it to them in the first place? Well, a couple things could happen. One is, let's say they didn't pass that background check that Lila just talked about. But what if they didn't respond to the offer by the deadline? You gave them 4 days, just like we've been advising you here, and they didn't respond. It might be time to just write them back saying you've rescinded the offer formally. We have had a couple clients where we said we really encourage you to put that deadline, and they don't put the deadline in, and they're calling us a week, 2 weeks after saying, oh my gosh, we didn't put the deadline in. Now we haven't heard from them. I'm always saying rescind the offer, and it can be simple email for them. You don't have to, I prefer email in writing so it's on both sides. I always just act quickly and just say we're going to rescind the offer. Doesn't seem like it's going to be a good fit going forward. Or if they just, I don't know, started having some weird behavior. Sometimes you're going to give an offer. You've done your soft offer, you've done the verbal, you put it in writing, and all of a sudden now they want to add all this extra. Well, I need an extra PTO. I need more hybrid days. I need this. And they come with a laundry list of demands is probably too harsh, but they come with a laundry list of extra additional asks that wasn't part of the initial. Sometimes in that case, I also rescind just because really if we've done the soft offer, we've done the verbal, we've met, like I don't care for if they change up the game too much on us at the end. Doesn't happen very often, but when it does, this is where it might be an opportunity just to rescind it and take it off the table because it kind of is an indicator maybe of future behavior or interactions with that individual. So there's a couple different reasons why you want to rescind it, but just make sure you put it in writing. Some key takeaways, talking about getting comfortable, talking about comp, do that after towards the end of that first interview. And don't have, I forgot to mention, I call it the fear of sharing the range. A lot of times our clients are saying, well, if I give a range, they're going to only want the top end. I have found most individuals are pretty realistic. If I am giving a range, and I know for a fact the person in front of me is a little bit more junior, I'll say, they might say, hey, I saw in the posting the range is 60 to 80,000. Yes, we're open to more up and coming candidates with several years of experience and also very senior candidates that are bringing more to the table. You would fall likely in that lower range. So there's nothing wrong with if they're going to bring up their range. Don't worry if you think they're going to ask for the bigger range. Most people are pretty realistic with where they would fall within that range as well. And then just understand a little bit more of candidate behavior, why they decline those offers, and then talk about kind of recapping on what makes an offer competitive. Know your market, know where you should be, really listen to what the candidates are saying in the market, connect with others to make sure you got a compelling offer. And then follow those 4 steps. So pre-offer, verbal offer, written offer, and then contingent upon the background check. So appreciate your time. We've got some time for questions, Karen, if anyone has typed in any along the way.
Yep, we have some questions here. How do you broach bonuses? Do you share the formula, past performances, etc.?
That is a great question. I prefer to share the full formula with them if you're comfortable. Something the nature of it could be as simple as, well, we are estimating a 10% bonus and it's based off of company performance and individual performance, and this is how we rate or determine the individual performance and the company performance. If it's true discretionary, then you're gonna have to just say, hey, it's 10%, but it's actually discretionary based off the owners and how the year went, etc. If it's a commission, a true commission structure, I like to lay out the full commission. You get 1% off of net sales, net new sales, or whatever the case might be.
Okay. What do you see employers doing that make salary conversations harder?
Okay, so what I see they're doing is usually their uncomfortableness will make the candidate more uncomfortable. It's probably the most I've seen. They're a little uneasy talking about it, and then that makes the candidate more uneasy talking about it. So I would say that's probably the biggest hiccup I've seen. I've also seen where they're holding those poker cards awfully close. They do have a range. The candidate's asking the range. They just don't want to share the range. They feel it's they're almost treating it too much like a game that it doesn't need to be that much of a game. I guess I would say take away the need to want to play the game and just be transparent. Your best hire is just going to be open and honest with you if you're open and honest with them. So my second takeaway is I often see it as if they think they're playing chess or something, and it doesn't have to be that dramatic of a process.
Makes sense. Is there a benefit to doing reference check after the offer as opposed to just before?
I prefer background checks. That's a great question. Background checks, I prefer after the offer. It's contingent. Reference checks, I prefer only on your final candidate, maybe two reference checks before the offer, just to make sure that, just to double check on maybe what they would like to work for. A tip on the reference checks is I like to make my reference checks not so cookie cutter. I would make it a little different per candidate. Let's say you have 2 candidates. One's maybe a real go-getter, maybe could be a little too overbearing. I don't know, I'm just making this up. And one is you think is a go-getter is a little softer, there's no reason to not tailor your questions per candidate and ask their prior employers or coworkers, hey, he or she's really good, really outgoing. Does it ever get in the way? Are they ever too much, for the others to handle? And another one you could say the opposite. Hey, they seem a little bit more laid back, but they seem like they hit their goals. What's it like working with them? Reference checks you can tailor. They don't have to be exactly the same questions that you're asking.
Good. If something comes up in the background check, what is the right way to handle it?
These are great questions. If something comes with the background check, I do prefer to just be transparent and tell the candidate that you're rescinding the offer due to something coming up the background check. And you can leave it as simple as that. You could actually say something came up in your criminal check that we're not comfortable with. You can do a one-liner, but no need to go into the back and forth. If it's something minor that came up and you feel like you could live with it, let's say they had, I don't know, a prior DUI in their early age and they're not going to be operating a vehicle and you feel like you can work with that. You might say something like, oh, something came up your background check, but we're comfortable kind of working through that with you. Then you need to be a little bit more specific if you have to work through something. Other than that, you can be kind of vague and just rescind the offer.
Okay, and I think I have one more question here. Um, if a candidate, what should you do if a candidate seems hesitant at the offer stage?
Another great question. I, if a candidate seems hesitant on the offer stage, I always say human behavior, doesn't lie. So if they're being hesitant for a reason. They're either not sure about your opportunity, fits, pay, something. We should have brought this up in the call. If you're in the verbal and you're giving them, let's say the verbal, and they've got some, yeah, let me look this over. And we've already been talking about it. We always on our end we feel really good about it, but I'm hearing a human nature sense of like some pause. Usually I'll just ask. It sounds like you got some hesitation. Is there any other questions I can answer? Anything that's got you some pause in terms of accepting. So if you're hearing that on the verbal, that's why I love the verbal before the written. It's a great way to just talk about that right then and there. And I actually did have this happen once where someone said, yeah, I will, let me look it over this weekend. And it just sounded like I was about to be broken up with, right? Like, oh man, I think I'm going to lose this one. I said, I'm hearing some hesitation. Walk me through what you're thinking because I'm hearing some hesitation. And it was as simple as, I don't know how to say this, but I have a bonus coming up in like 3 months and I would be leaving a lot on the table. So I don't know if I can take this one because I feel rude. I wouldn't want to ask. It was for one of our clients. Wouldn't want to ask your client for an increase, but I also don't want to leave this bonus on the table. Well, all I had to do is talk to the client, and they ended up working out a deal. But and he got hired. It's a great hire. But what if we want to ask on the hesitation? Sometimes the best candidates have a small ask, and the best candidates are too shy to ask for it. So when you hear hesitation, go ahead and ask what their hesitation is. See if you can't work that out. But great question, and technically probably should have covered that on the verbal side.
Yeah. And one more actually just came in, so it might be a quick one. How do you handle relocation offers?
Oh, very good. Relocation offers, I would say 95% of employers are offering a relocation, we call it bonus or package. And of the 95% that offer some type of relo assistance, most are 5 to 15,000, with 5 and 10,000 being the most common numbers offered. And usually that is actually given in a form of a bonus before they start, maybe a week to 2 weeks before they start. It's given to them as an upfront bonus for them to use however they want to cover moving expenses, switching houses, etc., temporary housing. And then you usually have your lawyers write up something. If they leave within 1 to 2 years, they would owe a portion or all of that back to you. But I would say most people are providing the relo. Most are 5 to 10,000, and almost all are given in terms of just an upfront relo bonus for them to use as needed.
Perfect. Well, that's all the questions that I have. So thank you all for being here, and we will send out the recording tomorrow. So make sure you check out your inbox tomorrow. If you have any other questions that came up, we will send out a short survey where you can share your questions that we can answer, any feedback, or even suggest future webinar topics. So again, thank you both for presenting, and thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.